Jaggery Dave, everyone. About 20 years ago, I was very lucky to spend 3 months visiting Thailand. It was part of an exchange program that I did. And I lived in a host family in a little farming village called Mae Ha in northern Thailand in the province of Phrae. And life in the village was very simple. We'd get up with the sun and the roosters, make breakfast, head out to the land where my host family owned the farming land, do whatever farming needed to be done, which was usually done by lunchtime, eat our lunch, take a nap, drive back to the house where we were staying, make some dinner, relax after dinner, and we'd go to bed early. Then we'd do the same thing. It was a very simple life, and honestly there was a lot of time in that life where there wasn't a lot to do, so we had a lot of time to just visit with friends, go for a bike ride, go visit the temple, spend some time at the local convenience store drinking tea or coffee and chit-chatting with the neighbors. It was a very simple life. Nobody had internet, very few people had phones. There were some TVs, but for the most part, life was very simple. We spent a lot of time outdoors, a lot of time walking, a lot of time visiting with friends. So then I came back from Thailand and I did experience some reverse culture shock. And one of the things that I remember vividly was shortly after I came back from Thailand, I visited our local university. And I remember standing in front of a bulletin board at the university that was absolutely covered with posters. And I remember standing in front of that bulletin board dumbfounded and sort of completely stopped in my tracks, that there was just so much visual information on that bulletin board that I just didn't know how to process. Because there was more information on that bulletin board than I had probably seen or had reason to take in and understand in the entire 3 months that I'd spent in Thailand. I was really overwhelmed. And I think in a lot of ways, many of us living in modern society feel the way that I felt standing in front of that bulletin board. Just kind of overwhelmed, dumbfounded, and almost unable to function because there's just so much information, so much stimulus coming at us day in and day out. So one thing that can be really helpful in that overwhelmed state that many of us experience living in modern society is the ability to filter out information that's not relevant to our personal situation or our personal goals. If you think about me and that bulletin board, let's say one of those posters was for my chemistry tutor. Well, I never took chemistry classes in university and I didn't intend to. So get information about a chemistry tutor isn't something that I needed. Similarly, maybe there was another poster on that bulletin board that was for a dance that had happened 2 weeks previous. Well, I didn't need that information either. The dance was over. In the same way in our modern society, we might get bombarded with lots of information and feel like we have to take it all in, we have to process it, we have to use it, but some of that stuff may not be relevant to our personal situation or our personal life goals. But how do we get really good at filtering that out? Well, that filtering is the job of the prefrontal cortex. So you might have heard about the prefrontal cortex. You might have heard about executive function. It's something that people are talking about a lot these days. So this area behind the forehead, this part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, is a part of the brain that is really instrumental, to be quite honest, to survival in modern society. One of its jobs, and it has more than one, but one of its jobs is to be that filter, is to help us to filter out unnecessary, unneeded, or unwanted information so that we can focus attention where we do want to put our attention. So how do we get our prefrontal cortex to function optimally? Well, there was some really interesting research that was done a few years ago about the role of bringing the mind into the present moment. Any time that you bring the mind into the present moment, you are helping the prefrontal cortex to work more optimally. So the more that we can bring the mind into the present, the more we're helping our prefrontal cortex to do its job. Now, you've probably experienced that bringing the mind into the present moment isn't super easy. Usually by saying, okay, come on brain, come on mind, just focus on what's right here, right now. Usually most of us find that that's a pretty tricky thing to do. And this is why it can be really useful to have a tool or a technique to help. And the sky breath meditation, as taught in the sky breath meditation course, is that tool. So there's actually a lot of science behind why sky, Sudarshan Kriya Yoga, is such an effective way of bringing the mind into the present moment. And if you're curious to know a little bit more about the science behind sky, I'll post a link up here in the corner somewhere. There'll be a link to some more information about sky and the science behind it. But all you really need to know is that sky is a very effective tool that has been shown repeatedly at bringing the mind into the present moment, and therefore improving the function of the prefrontal cortex and helping you to filter some of that unnecessary, unneeded information. You think about it, in modern society, we're just bombarded, whether it's our social media feed, whether it's our email inbox, whether it's just turning on the radio and listening to what's the news of what's happening in the world. There's just so much information, and it's too much for a lot of us to handle. So having that really effective filter can make it easier for us to stay focused on the things that are relevant to us, that we do want to put our attention on. If that sounds like something that's interesting to you, I warmly invite you to join my next Sky Breath Meditation course. I'll post the link to the course in the comments section below, and I look forward to seeing you there. As always, I welcome your comments and questions. Please feel free to leave them below. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Jai Gurudev.